But none of that can take away what he did and how hard it was.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Decoding TV bonus episode about Andor Season 2. I'm David Chen. Joining me for the conclusion of this sequence of podcasts, you can find his work at youtube.com/Patrick H. Willems. Patrick Willems, are you excited? Are you sad? What's the feelings going through your mind today as we come to an end here?
David Chen, I am a bit of both. A lot of emotions. This is, we have reached the end of this season. We have reached the end of this podcast series. I wish this could have lasted for like 3 months,
Yes.
like it did when we did season 1.
It should have. It should have lasted for 3 months.
It should have.
We were deprived of 3 months of Patrick and I podcasting about this.
I know. It would have been great to be able to really just like devote like an hour to digging into like every individual episode, but this is this is the hand we were dealt, and but no, I've really enjoyed this time, and I'm excited to talk about Andor for the final time with you.
Yeah, so we're going to dive into Andor Season 2 episodes 10, 11, and 12, the last new Andor episodes that will ever be made. And we're really excited to dive into it. I want to, give a shout out to all the people who have engaged with this this series of podcasts that we've done, particularly on YouTube. Got a lot of comments at youtube.com/@decodingtv about it, and of course from Decoding TV subscribers as well. One thing I wanted to mention before we start today is Dan Gvozden has been writing these amazing recaps and analysis over at decodingtv.com. You should go over there and subscribe. I've been reading from them for most of our conversations about Andor. However, due to scheduling reasons, I do not have a Dan Gvozden rundown for this episode. So this episode is going to be a lot looser. This podcast is going to be a lot looser, a lot more rough around the edges than the other ones have been, because there's been no Dan Gvozden rundown. But make sure you subscribe to decodingtv.com and get all the rundowns that he wrote, because like he will have caught things that you missed, and he did a wonderful job for this sequence of shows.
And I just want to say that the reason we do not have Dan Gvozden's recaps is because I have to leave town tomorrow, and so we're recording this earlier than we normally would.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of the recording, I was violently ill last time we recorded, and I'm slightly less violently ill this time, but you might still hear an occasional cough from me because I'm recovering from bronchitis. So bad timing for me getting bronchitis, but I am on the mend, so hopefully it won't impact the podcast too much. And the last thing I just want to say before we get into like follow-ups and actually start talking about the show is if many people have started listening to this, watching this on YouTube because they are fans of Patrick Willems. Welcome on Decoding TV. We do a lot of analysis of television year-round. So be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/decodingtv to get lots of in-depth conversations about shows like The Last of Us, Squid Game, a lot of stuff coming up this summer. So check it out at youtube.com/decodingtv or Decoding TV, wherever your podcasts can be found.
And also, even though I'm not on, those other episodes, you still have plenty of David Chen saying the name Patrick. So don't worry.
So true. I do have a shocking number of Patrick collaborators.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about follow-ups to last week's conversation about Andor. Now, I would say that one of my big statements that I made last week was I found Cyril Karn's arc not unconvincing, but I just wish that the show had dedicated more time to establishing it, I think. And did get a lot of pushback on that. Troy Reyes wrote in at youtube.com/@decodingtv. Cyril was a civilian who was bought into the idea that the Empire kept order and peace. He wasn't privy to the Empire's evil machinations. Partagaz told Miro to make sure of that. You don't need to be a bleeding heart rebel to be not okay with mass civilian slaughter, which the Empire knows, which was why they feed propaganda about the Gormans being violent, end quote. So essentially, I think what Troy was saying is Cyril's arc is extremely believable as presented in the show. And again, I don't actually think it's unbelievable. I would say that my big issue is it's one thing to go from Cyril is is moved by the plight of the Gorman people, right? And because he is like in that society, he's moved by the plight of the Gorman people and is potentially willing to take their side against the Empire. That's like one thing that I feel like actually the show has given us barely enough for. It's another thing to show that like Cyril would choke out his girlfriend, and leave her because of how all this played out. And I just, uh, that's the leap that was a little bit too far for me, just because of what we've seen of their relationship and how I imagine their relationship dynamics might play out. But anyway, I wanted to bring up that basically a lot of people disagreed with me, and to clarify my own critique, Patrick, don't know if you have any thoughts. Okay, if you don't on this one.
Not especially. It's again, I feel like I'm somewhere like in between here, where yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Again, Cyril is not becoming, he's not joining the rebellion. This is simply him just kind of realizing that the Empire is not what he has believed it was for his whole life, and then also realizing that his girlfriend in probably well, actually, I'm just going off of some interviews that I read and watched with Kyle Soller, the actor who plays Cyril Karn. Him saying that this is probably the only romantic relationship Cyril Karn has ever had.
Right, exactly.
Then him learning that he was basically used as a pawn in her plan to, essentially like massacre civilians.
Yeah.
I do like, again, I would have liked maybe an extra scene or two, just to like, I guess make that emotional jump a little bit clearer. But I do also, I get his sudden and surprising anger.
Yeah. Fair enough. Appreciate people taking my critique seriously and then critiquing my critiques in a respectful fashion. It's what makes this podcast what it is.
Oh yeah. Also, I gotta say, impressive for a YouTube comment. They are not usually that civil when they disagree.
I'm just gonna say the YouTube comments at youtube.com/anticodingtv generally very constructive and thoughtful. So
extra impressive because they are YouTube comments about Star Wars.
It's so true. That's
so Decoding TV, a miracle.
All right. We talked a little bit about the line "Rebellions are built on hope," and I think I had kind of reminded you last week that this was a line that this was a line that Cassian Andor had said in Rogue One that Jyn had heard, and that then she repeated it.
Rebellions are built on hope.
Rebellions are built on hope.
Because you were kind of speculating that it was, maybe this is a line that a lot of people say. The mastermind behind Andor, Tony Gilroy, gave an interview to EW.com where he kind of explained the origin of this line. The headline of the article is Tony Gilroy created Andor's Rebellions Are Built on Hope origin story after his son mocked him. And he describes the origin of that scene as follows. The bellhop character like speaks the line, right? And this article says, this was never part of Tony Gilroy's master plan. He added it to the season 2 scripts after his son teased him about it. Quote, my son is a big Star Wars fan and he often comes to the house and busts my balls at the computer about how little I know, Gilroy explains. One day he's there at the house and he's goofballing on me and he's like, well, who's going to introduce Rebellions Are Built on Hope? And I go, what do you mean? Gilroy continues. He goes, well, in Rogue One, Diego says it, and then Jyn repeats it. And I go, well, isn't that from somewhere? He goes, no, man, what are you talking about? You better figure that out, end quote. Now, look, in general, I'm positive on this story because here's the thing. Here's why I'm mildly irked by this, Patrick Willems, is because I feel like this is all from this whole, like, this whole mentality and ethos of all the post original trilogy Star Wars is, we have to explain where all this stuff came from, which has obviously led us to, like, in my opinion, some cringeworthy and occasionally bad storytelling around Star Wars. And so this impulse, like, we need to explain where that line came from. It's like, no, you don't. No one was asking where was the Rebellions Are Built on Hope line when they watched Rogue One. However, if you're gonna explain it, I think giving it to the bellhop is actually a really good move.
Mhm.
Because I think what's great about the bellhop character and saying rebellions are built on hope is because, especially in the times we live in, the bellhop character, he resisted. He had a very small or several small acts of resistance in furtherance of the rebellion, and that was enough for him. And I think that is a really important message for our times. And then for him to say the rebellions are built on hope character, it all fits. So for this one instance, I didn't mind it. Patrick Willems, any thoughts?
I'm with you. I mean, the kind of, when we're talking about prequels and when we're talking about, giving the origins to things that no one was asking for the origin of, I feel like on one end of the spectrum, you've got how Han Solo got his name in the film Solo: A Star Wars Story.
I don't have people.
Solo.
Right.
Something absolutely no one ever asked about. And then we got an answer, and we all collectively, millions of people around the world, rolled their eyes at the same time. But this is something where it's like this moment to me in this line doesn't feel like they constructed a whole scene around like, let's explain where he like learned the line, or maybe, like learned this idea or whatever. This is for me the good kind of prequel stuff, where it doesn't like it's not wasting any time. It's not going out of its way to give you an answer to something, but it does slightly deepen the original work that we're familiar with. And so now just knowing that, like, when we rewatch Rogue One and we hear Cassian say that line, we just know, like, oh, this is a thing that a guy at the Gorman Massacre said to him, that then did like stick with him and like meant something. It's like what could have just been a casual line actually like made an impression on him.
And more importantly, the character is engaged in an act of rebellion at the time, like, and it's very organic in that sense. So
yeah. And so, I mean, once again, Tony Gilroy has figured out how to thread the needle of doing a prequel that works.
One last thing before we get to this week's episode is Patrick Willems, and that is just wanted to acknowledge the universal acclaim that has formed around, I believe, mostly episode 8 of Andor season 2. According to IMDb, the episode 8 became one of the highest rated television episodes of all time, up there with Reigns of Castamere, Breaking Bad's Ozymandias. Just a lot of people rating it a 10. I mean, I think the average is something like 9.8, 9.9. And that is actually quite remarkable given how little the show has actually been out, like how little time the show's actually been out. So wanted to acknowledge that, like, I think the last week's batch of episodes was like the one when everyone was like, oh, holy shit, this is incredible. This is like a masterpiece, one of the greatest of all time. And it's notable that, like, we witnessed it happen. We got to experience it. And so just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I do not put a lot of stock in user ratings when it comes to media. We don't need to get into the whole history of review bombing and stuff like that.
You're saying that on occasion the system has been manipulated, Patrick Willems? Is that what you're trying to imply?
Once in a while. But and yeah, it's like when some other Star Wars thing is going to have an average rating on IMDb of like 4.3, I'm like, yeah, that is just a reflection of a bunch of like freaks being like mad about stupid things. Like,
yeah,
again, like that to me is never an indication of actual quality. But
except
that said,
except in this one instance, right?
it is. Well, I will just say it is nice to see just really wide recognition of something that I think is really good, and also nice to see, audiences positive about a Star Wars thing again.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, good. I think this thing is good, and I'm glad. And because there's been a lot of discussion about how like Andor is far from the most widely watched Star Wars show,
Yeah,
and I'm like, okay, good. People are catching on.
indeed. Patrick Willems, let's get into our thoughts on Andor Season 2, Episodes 10, 11, and 12. Patrick, what were your overall thoughts on this batch of episodes?
My short thoughts are, once again, loved them. I thought it was a really wonderful ending. I will say it is initially it was a little bit surprising how small they are. Like how like kind of intimate the episodes are, because as we have discussed across these two seasons, Andor is so good at building across usually like 3 episodes to like a really spectacular, thrilling climax. And I think it's safe to assume going in that like, oh, for our final set of episodes, we're going to once again build to a spectacular conclusion. And then as it's going, and I think especially when you look at how like the first episode in which the title character does not appear for a second, it is not about him at all. I start to realize like, wait a second. The actual climax of this is Rogue One, which this is leading us directly into. So why would there be like a space battle right here when immediately after this they're going to go into Rogue One, which has a space battle and has the Death Star, shooting its its giant cannon at planets and all of that. And I found these 3 episodes mostly just really moving, as it just spends time with these characters we've come to know so well and really reflect on, the like what all of them have sacrificed, all of the people that they've lost, like how much people have given for this like this greater purpose. And then also just how kind of especially when you look back at like the first episode of the season and how the rebellion was in total disarray, just how people have like really like learned to trust each other and just actually like kind of built these bonds that not long ago seemed kind of impossible. And I found the whole thing pretty moving. Yeah, once again, thumbs up from me.
I was not as positive as you on these episodes. I thought this was the weakest batch, and I think largely it's because it's this batch of episodes feels the most like it is just filling in the space between Andor the show and Rogue One. However, despite what I just said, agreed with you that like having time to pause and like reflect on what we've all experienced, the characters we've lost was nice, and the show definitely allowed us to do that in this batch of episodes. And the ending of the show is very, very beautiful. It's like an all-timer ending that I think a lot of people won't necessarily see coming. And for that reason alone, I think it's like overall, my overall feelings on the batch are positive, but I do think it's the weakest of the 4. Just like, yeah, I as people who've listened to this know, like, I don't really go in for that. Like, what were all the details that happened between this and this? Like, I don't care about any of that stuff. So, like, this felt like we have to set up like he's going after Tivik because that's how we meet Cassian in in Rogue One, and it's like, okay, like, does everyone really remember Tivik? Is Tivik like so important? And kind of, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But anyway, so overall, wasn't a huge fan, but the ending was excellent, and so I'm mixed to positive on this batch of episodes.
I will say I rewatched the arc this morning before recording.
Oh wow!
And it grew in my estimation upon rewatch.
Well, I think Patrick Willems, my main issue with the arc, and then looking back on the show, is the show should have been called Luthen. No one wants to talk about it, but the show should have been called Luthen.
Well, this is the thing. This is one of. I'm glad you bring this up, because this is one of the takes I had really with this arc, which is the thought of like, because Tony Gilroy has talked about how
Or I guess
You know-
Rail would have been the analogous name. Rail.
Yeah,
'cause
exactly.
His last name is Rail. Anyway, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Tony Gilroy has talked about, his odd journey in coming to make this show where like they decided they wanted to make it like in the really early days of like Disney Plus being a thing. They're like, and we're going to do a Cassian show. It's like they went to Tony Gilroy and were like, hey, what would you do? And he's like, I don't know, here's some ideas. They went back and tried it with like multiple other writers, didn't work, and finally came back around. He's like, okay, I guess I'll do it. And I really do wonder if the thing that convinced him to do it, to be like, I do want to tell the story, is when he cracked the character of Luthen Rail. Because the key thing in this final arc is just, and I want to be clear, and also we can just get into spoilers, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But Luthen Rail dies at the end of episode 10, the first episode of this arc. He is dead then. And but so much of this final arc is just people reflecting on or the show reflecting on and characters discussing what he did, how he was basically the forgotten key to the rebellion. That none of this would have been possible if it were not for, this, to use his favorite word, bastard, manipulating all of these people and using them and making them really mad in pursuit of this dream, in pursuit of the sunrise that he'll never see. Like that, like I kept thinking about that, the classic monologue that Luthen has in season 1. And I'm just like, that really is, now seeing the show in its totality, that monologue feels like that is the linchpin of this entire show. That is the thesis statement right there. With this guy, that speech, that's what this entire thing is about. And so now this is like, that's part of why I appreciated this final arc so much. It is the show and the characters reflecting on all of those ideas that he put forth in that speech back in season 1.
Yeah, and the show seems to be kind of putting forward this theory of rebellion, revolution, that you need people like Luthen who are willing to work towards something beyond themselves, willing to sacrifice themselves. You need them to be a little bit crazy, but not too crazy, because then you're like Saw. Like you can't do that. They need to be like organized. They need to be willing to kill people, but like not too many people. And that it's those people who like you often will like. I think the show's saying like those people you might never hear about. Like we never heard about Luthen in the subsequent 6 movies, did we, Patrick?
We sure did not.
And so it's like those people, they're all these like unsung people basically that like did this work behind the scenes that you never saw, but that were nonetheless instrumental towards creating these mass movements. That seems to be like what the show is saying. And this final arc is really like a tribute to Luthen, really, because it's like because of him that like any of this, it's because of him that Cassian is in any of this at all, right?
I mean, Luthen is really, the web. Luthen is the Madam Web of Andor in that his web connects them all.
That's right.
Yeah,
so true.
It is the thing of like you've got Mon Mothma on Yavin as like Willman walks by and like Vel comes in and all of that, and it's like, I mean, granted, Mon Mothma and Vel are cousins, but so many of those people are there. Yavin is like possible because of this guy, and
it's interesting, right? It's interesting that like I think you're right that he cracked the character of Luthen Rail, and that's why he could make the show. But it's also like that could have been Andor. Right, like he could have made that be the Andor character, but he decided to not do that. He being Tony Gilroy, I do think it's better and more interesting this way. Because
it's also it's hard to, even just looking at Rogue One, it's hard to imagine that this guy, that, just like going in like meeting informants in like a back alley is like he built the rebellion. That guy, like he is clearly a guy who like works for the rebellion.
He's like a soldier. He's like a soldier.
He is a soldier. Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, so here's something I'd like to bring up, because if we're just talking about Luthen, in episode 10, the first part of this arc, we get a series of flashback scenes to Luthen and Clea, how they first met.
Yeah, how about this? Let's go through the episode because we'll get to that. We'll get to that and
Okay.
we'll talk about it. And I don't hear what your thoughts are, but let's actually talk about what happened. Let's begin by saying this episode happens 1 year later, as the last episode, BBY1. Now, that is I think that is a deceptive designation, BBY1, because that implies that it is 1 year before the Battle of Yavin. In fact, it's closer to like
BBY 1 week.
I'm going to say like 2 to 3 weeks before the Battle of Yavin, tops.
At most.
At most. Like I looked up on Reddit, somebody did the math, and like the events of A New Hope take place over the course of 6 days, and the events of the events of Rogue One lead right up to the events of A New Hope, and that wasn't, I know Rogue One takes place over like decades, but like but the final events of which this matches up with, and so anyway, yeah, I think we're weeks before the Battle of Yavin, but that's not as cool sounding as BBY1. So yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm guessing it's a thing where BBY1 goes right up to the day of the Battle of Yavin, and then
yeah. Fair enough. Which makes sense. Okay, anyway, what actually happens? As the episode begins, Clea gets a message from Lonnie, Luthen's ISB mole. Luthen and Lonnie meet, and Lonnie reveals that the Emperor's energy program is a lie. In fact, Orson Krennic's been building a secret weapon. Luthen offers to take Lonnie to Yavin because he's trying to get himself to safety. He's secured safety for his family, but he's trying to get himself to safety.
Lonnie has a wife and child.
Well, we learned that in the first season.
Oh, yes, that is true. We're reminded that he has a wife and child.
No, well, the show didn't forget. The show's like, hey, remember, this guy has stakes. This guy has something to lose. Anyway, but Luthen decides, hey, I can't risk this, and he ends up murdering Lonnie instead. Very sad.
It
Luthen,
is.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the sequence is really great. Like the place that they're meeting, like on this bench next to this long like pool of water, once again looks incredible. Beautiful blending of like actual locations with digital set extensions. The shot revealing Lonnie dead, of just this really wide shot of him like from the back, just kind of like slumped on the bench, is so great. And then one of my favorite shots in the whole thing, there's this shot of Luthen walking down these stairs in like a big public area that is like this really high angle Dutch angle with like these really sharp shadows cutting across these steps. It's really incredible stuff. Once again, we have a new director for this last batch who I thought crushed it.
Yeah. Do you remember the name of that director? By the way, we should get their name. Why don't you look it up while
I'm on it.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, after Luthen talks with Lonnie, he meets with Clea, and they exchange all the information. There, Luthen tells Clea, "Yep, go ahead."
The director is Alonso Ruiz Palacios.
Yes, there you go. And he talks with Clea, and he exchanges the information with Clea. And I really got the feeling when they were talking, like, this is going to be the last time they ever meet, right? Which it ends up kind of being the case. Because shortly afterwards, Dedra shows up at Luthen's place of work, which is very shocking. Huge moment. And
this is the opposite of when Mon Mothma and Cassian finally met, and we're like, oh my god, finally, after like a season and a half, characters are converging, and here these characters finally come face to face, and I'm so stressed out.
Absolutely. You're the whole time I'm watching, I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, does she know what's going on? Like, does she know that he's the guy? And then because she kind of starts to play it off by like, hey, I'm just visiting this shop. But then she removes the vintage Imperial Starpath unit.
A vintage Imperial Starpath unit.
From season 1 of the show. And that's when you know the jig is up.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And also before she even arrives, Luthen has been in the back room pouring some kind of like
Mercury
hot
style,
mercury
yeah.
across their radio, like transmitter stuff to just destroy all evidence of what they've got there. And there's a line also from the opening scene that I did want to bring up when Clea is talking to Luthen and about like this message from Lonnie that he wants to meet, and Clea says something about to tell is hesitant to do the meeting like unless things are perfect, and Luthen says we ran out of perfect a long time ago.
I think we used up all the perfect.
Yeah,
like really indicating that like, look, they're at a point now where they cannot be as careful as they used to be, because it's like things are really coming down to the wire, and they just have to just take big risks if they want to actually accomplish anything.
Indeed. Luthen and Dedra Meero have a confrontation where they kind of like lay out what their ideologies are.
And she says, "You disgust me."
Yeah. And he says to her, freedom scares you. She says, you don't want freedom. You want chaos for everyone but you. Ruin the galaxy and then run back to your ridiculous wig and little workshop. And then at some point, Luthen says to her, you are too late. The rebellion isn't here anymore. It's flown away. It's everywhere now.
There's a whole galaxy out there waiting to disgust you.
And I think that's the last thing that Luthen basically ever says, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful, like, final concluding line for him, that like he has finished what he set out to do, which is create rebellion everywhere, right? That's from this one dude, he has created kind of a whole movement. And then he essentially tries to kill himself before he can be taken in and questioned.
He stabs himself in the stomach with one of his ancient
specialty
daggers.
Item. Yeah. But he doesn't successfully finish the job, and so Dedra Meero calls in, and they take Luthen in, and they try to keep him alive. News of Meero's raid and Young's death reaches the ISB, and it becomes clear that Dedra has overstepped her bounds in pursuing Luthen to the extent that she did. We then get a series of flashbacks where we see how Luthen and Clea first met. Luthen is a sergeant in the Galactic Civil War and finds Clea as a stowaway on his vessel. We meet them again later in life in a cafe. They witness we meet them later. They're in a cafe. They detonate some Imperial vehicles on a bridge. It looks like they're on a Naboo-like planet. We see them experiencing like the oppression of the Empire and so on. Now, Patrick Willems, you had wanted to say something about these flashbacks earlier, like. And I'm curious, like in general, how effective did you find them?
I mean, here's the thing. As I think I've mentioned before, Clea has become one of my favorite characters on this show. Like I'm talking maybe top 3. And so I really I liked having her get the spotlight, especially in this episode. Like this is really the Clea episode. We get these flashbacks about how she met Luthen, how he basically kind of became this surrogate father to her, how from an early age, how she her witnessing like a public execution, like the beginnings of her like dedicating her life to this cause. But a thing that I wanted to ask about is, because it's not like you can infer based on the timeline that Luthen was fighting, that was like a sergeant in the Galactic Civil War, but I'm like, where is he from? Like, who is he actually like fighting for right here? Like, what is the situation? Because he's clearly not, on the Imperial side. There's no stormtroopers or clone troopers around him. So I'm like, I'm just, we don't really get any clear info about exactly what this battle is, what army he's in, and I'm like, man, I want to know everything.
Well, according to Wikipedia, this is Star Wars Fandom Wiki, little information about Luthen's network and activities survived the Galactic Civil War, with historian Beaumont Kin mentioning him as an enigmatic early rebel spy master in his book The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire. So, That
Yeah.
we don't know that much about it, but I thought this was overall pretty effective. I mean, this is first of all, this is a show that has a lot of confidence because you're doing a bunch of flashbacks to a character that we met like 15 episodes ago. Uh, uh like we're supposed to be like wrapping things up, not like filling in more backstory at this point. But the show's like, we're gonna pause. We're gonna shoot a bunch of shit that's with like new hair and makeup for Luthen and all this stuff, and new sets and all this stuff to explain the relationship between these two characters.
And also,
And,
remember, in an episode where our title character never shows up.
yes, and I had always wondered, like, what is the relationship between these two characters? Like, how did they meet? Because they seemed like really on the same page, but they're not like, there's certainly no romantic attraction between them. Like, how did they connect? And then it's actually really cool that this is just their latest identity. Like that, they've probably had many like covers before, and like this is just their latest one. Is he works in this shop, and you know and she's his assistant, but really she's his kind of daughter, and it's like, it's
also
a cool,
and it does seem like there's that one scene where Clea just kind of like jumps in and like takes over his negotiations for like selling some like jewelry at a shop, and it really like you can kind of see there that like if it were not for Clea, Luthen would not have been able to build this identity as the successful antiquities dealer on Coruscant. Like she really is like even if she's his quote unquote assistant, she played a major role in helping build what this became.
We have a situation where Luthen is now in custody, and Clea like infiltrates the hospital building where Luthen is being held. And while the flashbacks are happening, Clea is doing all this stuff, and she's a badass.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to point out, by the way, that the actress who plays Clea is named Elizabeth Hulao, and she essentially has virtually no acting credits before Andor season 1. I don't know if you're aware of that. She has appeared in some other TV shows, but like it's not like she had this huge career and then like.
Was she a theater actor?
I'm not sure,
because that's not on IMDb.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. But yeah, I mean, this is one of her first like on-screen credits, and she crushed it. This is like an incredible career-defining role, and I think she did a magnificent job, especially in this episode when she finally makes it to Luthen's room after killing a bunch of dudes and has to disconnect him from life support. She gives him a little kiss. It's very, very sad. Very, very sad.
It is. That is very sad. Just like, I mean, he's basically, since we see these flashbacks, her only family, and has been for probably 15 years. And I'm not sure exactly how old she's meant to be, but I'm assuming somewhere mid to late 20s. But yeah, and also just the whole sequence of her infiltrating the hospital. And also, you get more just, ISB being, just really loathsome in the way they take over the hospital and like the whole floor. But just seeing the way that she gets through, her casually walking through disguise as a nurse, then like whipping out a blaster, like blowing guys away. But also,
love that
then as a distraction to clear the floor that Luthen is on, she has planted explosive devices on a bunch of Imperial transports outside. Just like Luthen did blowing up those tanks in that flashback scene. And so it's like, look, the student has become the master. She and look, if they want to make Clea a Star Wars story because she survives this show, I will be first in line for it. If they are going to write Clea spin-off novels, I will read them.
So Luthen dies, and the remaining episodes are basically spent paying tribute to Luthen. Huge amounts of fun pay tribute to Luthen. We talked about it a little bit already. But anyway, in the aftermath of Luthen's death, Imperial Supervisor Hewitt is looking to pin the whole mess on Dedra Meero. So I think it is a bad thing that Luthen died for the Empire, because they wanted to probably take him alive. Also, Dedra wasn't even supposed to be working on this case, right? Like,
she's just still so consumed with Axis, the thing she got pulled away from
Right.
to work on Gorman. Yeah, because then, because in that episode, Hirt comes in and arrests her because, yeah, she had first of all, Lonnie had been, he had gotten her code, so he had to like hack into her account and like find out all the info that she knew, but then also mentions that she had been just like she had like mistakenly been sent something.
yes, several intel bundles were forwarded to my office by mistake. So she gets interrogated by Orson Krennic, which is awesome. By the way, I got to say, like, Ben
scene is so
Mendelsohn, Ben Mendelsohn in the show, it has been awesome. It's felt completely seamless.
Yeah.
It's felt like, oh, this is always, this is just always. But it's a big deal that he appeared in the show, and it's like, oh wow, it really fills out the world more to know about Orson Krennic's background. And like all the stuff he did leading up to it. Never got to see it. Wish we got some Mads Mikkelsen in there, maybe, but whatever. I know you can't do everything.
They do start talking about Galen Erso.
Yes, they do.
And this is a thing because, like, I like Krennic so much in Rogue One, but what is such a bummer about him is that almost every scene with Krennic in Rogue One, he is talking to a CGI Peter Cushing, which is like driving me insane.
Yeah.
And so just getting to see Ben Mendelsohn play Krennic, delivering like really, really great dialogue in scenes with human beings is a blast. And the interrogation scene with Dedra, as she is she's like watching everything she has been building for years like crumbling around her, and she's like quivering with anxiety, and the moment when he just partially like puts his finger on top of her head,
skull. Yeah, that was a good one.
It's great. It's really great, and just the way this is going, where it's like you really, I think more so even than in Rogue One, you appreciate just like what a massive like secretive operation building the Death Star was, where that they were like keeping it from so many ISB people that they like. Krennic is furious because he's like, I had this perfect plan. We manipulated so much stuff. We like built this whole like propaganda campaign on Gorman just so we could like mine some calcite there.
Yeah.
We were getting Kyber crystals from Jeddah. We were doing so much stuff and did everything perfectly. And now Dedra Miro, because you were like, loose with your emails or whatever, you have essentially ruined this for us.
She shouldn't have used a private email server, but yeah.
But her emails.
But it turns out both Partagaz and Dedra know about the Death Star. She admits she's a scavenger, but all she was ever doing was looking for Axis. And basically, one of Krennic's men tortured an informant to death who pointed a finger at Luthen. She wouldn't have found Axis if not for being a scavenger, but he's furious with her because she confronted Luthen on her own. And she also tells Krennic about Clea, his assistant, who they did not find. Her arc basically mirrors Cyril in many ways, right? Because she was on this path of revenge that kind of messed up her other path of working for the totalitarian government. And it's like, if she just kept to the working for the totalitarian government, things probably would have worked out just fine for her. Probably not. I'm being sarcastic, but still.
Well, here's the thing. If she hadn't been so obsessed with finding Axis, aka Luthen, there's a decent chance she would have gotten promoted to working on the Death Star once it became operational, and then would have gotten blown up in that.
Yeah, that would have been bad for her. So here is where I think some of the weaknesses of the storytelling come into play, Patrick, with these 1 year gaps. Mm-hmm. Between the show, because like this, in my opinion, this is like a lot of stuff to happen off screen. Like I don't think we saw any of her like scavenging in the last batch of episodes or anything like that. It's just like, oh, okay, like wow, there's a lot of shit.
She was all focused on Gorman.
Yeah, it's like there is a lot of shit that happened between the last episodes, and it's just gonna like, don't love that, but it's the situation we're in, the path they chose to structure the stories. However, we get the idea. Like overall, she went rogue. She tried to take Luthen down. It didn't work well. Now she's being blamed for the whole mess. It's going to go badly for her. Meanwhile, Clea goes back to the safe house and digs out an extremely old-looking radio and starts radioing out a message to anyone who can hear.
Which I love this. It is literally just like inside the walls. She has to just hammer a hole into the wall to dig this thing out. It's like this was, it's like it's been in there for like, I don't know, over a decade.
We cut to Yavin. The rebellion is starting to develop. Things are getting organized. There's like ships, there's fleet, like people. It's wow, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing, Patrick Willems. You know,
Willman has a limp now after getting injured at on Gorman. But for the first time in like the whole season, Willman is like actually doing okay. He is not.
He's not inhaling vapors, and he's
and him and Drina still going strong.
Yeah. So he gets the message from Clea. Cassian is playing dominoes with K2SO and Melshi.
We didn't mention Melshi last time.
Not dominoes, but like whatever the game
Something.
is. But yeah. I'm sure we'll get some comments explaining what it is. Anyway, yes, Melshi's here. Melshi,
his friend from Narkina 5.
Yes. Will comes in. It's an SOS message. And they decide, like, they have this big discussion about like what they should do about it. But Cassian, K2SO, and Melshi decide to go on a rescue mission to Coruscant to save who I think they assume will be Luthen and possibly Clea. Right? That's who I think there's.
I think when they, having just rewatched them, when they get to Coruscant, they really like. They expect Luthen to be in the safe house. Like there's some dialogue about that. Like they think they're there for him, and then Clea delivers the news that he's dead.
Yeah, very sad.
There's a lot of people saying Luthen's dead in these episodes, which really makes you realize like, oh wow, everyone knew Luthen.
Yeah.
There's I mean, not to jump ahead, but I do like when Cassian is talking to Bail Organa and said, you guys had more in common than you realize. Like you might have gotten along better.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the ISB is descending upon Clea. So we actually, Patrick, there's no like big space fight, but there is another tense heist-like action sequence that unfolds at the apartment building where the safe house is located. And it's actually really well done, but K2SO comes in again, freaking terrifying, like just knocking dudes out left and right. It's like, holy shit, you do not want to go. It's literally, they made this K2X droid into like a horror film character.
Except this time it's satisfying.
Yeah, because it's on our side, right?
Yeah. And it's also an interesting thing here is that Hirt goes in. Hirt, who I like how Hirt was like almost a joke character in the second arc when he's like being like overzealous at work, and then he's going and like having a bunch of cocktails at the party. And here, now that like Lonnie is dead, and he gets an opportunity to like get one up on Dedra, who just nobody at work likes at all. I bet Blevin is going to be really happy when he hears what happens to Dedra. If you remember, our good buddy Blevin from season 1.
Our good buddy, yeah.
But like,
gotta get those Blevin action figures.
Yeah, but once again, we have an ISB officer who was just so eager to take charge, and like, it reminds me of Cyril in the first arc of season 1. When he's like been behind a desk for so long, and he's like, oh wait, now I can like command a squadron. Now I can go in there with like guns and like and feel like a soldier. And what I like here is that this little like squad he goes in with, they're basically stormtroopers, but they're not wearing helmets.
Right.
And like they're in the like classic white stormtrooper armor, and then they give Hirt this it's really not effectual, but it's like a bulletproof vest. It's like a white vest of like stormtrooper armor to put on over his coat. But these guys just like, especially their leader, like a British guy with like a shaved head and like a handlebar mustache. I'm like, this has way more like, Black Ops mercenary vibes than we're used to Imperial officers having. And seeing this like basically SWAT team go into, like this crowded apartment building is like, it's pretty intense. I thought this whole sequence, which starts at the end of The second episode and then continues into the third was great. And then,
I agree.
I
Really
mean,
well done.
when K2 comes in and picks up Hirt and uses him as a human shield as he's just getting like pelted with like blaster hits, it's crazy stuff.
Yeah, really cool, and the confrontation like at the door and all the dynamics of that were kind of interesting as well. And so yeah, Andor going out with a bang, showing like, hey, even though it's like relatively small stakes of like, can we get this person out, still can deliver a really tense, well done set piece.
Yeah, the final time Cassian Andor ever goes to Coruscant.
He doesn't go in Rogue One at all, right? No, yeah.
Do we even see Coruscant in Rogue One?
I don't recall.
He's mostly on Jeddah and then that rainy planet and then Scarif.
Yeah, the Ring of Kafrene and then so yeah.
Well,
yeah,
it's Kafrene first, then Jeddah, then the place where he's supposed to kill Galen Erso, then Scarif.
Yeah.
A lot of planets in that movie.
So they finally get to Clea. They have a conversation. Like Clea's like not happy that Cassian left them, right? And Cassian says like, I made a choice, the right choice. No one can do this alone. He knew that. He just couldn't swallow his pride. And then Clea grabs him and says, thank the galaxy he didn't. He stayed for this. He stayed for what I've just told you, because they've communicated the information. Now, look, here's a question I had, Patrick Willems, and I understand if you don't know the answer to this, but basically, at the end of the episode, he goes and meets Tivik, right? And that's who he meets in the beginning of Rogue One.
Yeah.
And Tivik tells him that the weapon is a planet killer. Like, so it's like, was Clea and Luthen instrumental to Tivik in some way? Because if not, then this Luthen's sacrifices weren't really that instrumental. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. Well, here's the thing. I have not rewatched Rogue One since before we covered season 1. So I cannot remember what he like the details that he talks about with Tivik. Like exactly.
Well, I actually have a clip that has it all. So I'm going to play the clip from Rogue One. He goes to the Ring of Kafrene. Andor goes to the Ring of Kafrene to meet Tivik. And if you're on YouTube at youtube.com/AtDecodingTV, probably this will be like a very short version because we're not going to play the whole thing because of content ID. But here is the clip from Rogue One where Cassian goes to meet Tivik.
What kind of weapon? A planet killer! That's what he called it. Planet killer.
So he goes to meet this like guy from Saw's camp, and they talk about but Tivik does reveal there's this rebel defective pilot who is Bodhi, right, played by Riz Ahmed, and then also, by the way, it's a planet killer, which I think is like the main information that Luthen gives to Clea. So anyway,
you do also have that there's that moment there where when he says Erso and Cassian says Galen Erso, and so clearly he knew that name going into that.
Right.
I mean, this is one of these situations where I'm like putting myself in Tony Gilroy's shoes, and I'm like, how do you enter this show? And like knowing what it has to lead into, and it's like, I think he made the right decision, which is that it is like, how are you going to wrap up like Luthen's story and Dedra's and all of that? And it's like, if the idea, like the knowledge of the Death Star existing is the big information that like that just makes like it, that is big enough that it drives so much of the story in this last arc.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if it creates a little bit of messiness where if you watch Rogue One right after, it's like, then he learns the information again.
Right.
It's like,
exactly.
I can't think of a better solution.
Yeah.
Like what is a thing that's going to get, like, that's going to motivate everything?
Right.
And also it is now, just now that we've seen this last arc of Andor and we've seen what a big deal just this Death Star information is. It's funny hearing that clip from Rogue One and being like, oh, it's just a thing some guy tells him.
Right. Because like, I guess is it clear that it's a planet killer from the Clea Luthen conversation?
I don't think so. I think it's just a super weapon that they've
It's a
been
super, they
working
know
on
it's a
for a
super
decade.
weapon. Basically, the big reveal is that it's not an energy program; it's a weapon.
Yes.
And so it's like, oh, we got to tell everyone he's making a weapon. But then, like, yeah, he finds out from Tivik anyway. I think you're right, Patrick, and I'm just being incredibly nitpicky. And maybe someone will point out that actually it was because of Luthen somehow that Tivik knew about it. Maybe that's true. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to see how it all lines up. I think you're right, though, Patrick Willems, that like it's a situation where, hey, they just threw in a bunch of random shit into this Tivik dialogue like 5 years ago or 10 years ago when they wrote it,
Right.
and now they need to reconcile it, and it's not quite as clean as they would like.
I mean, really, this gets into a thing that I've mentioned on the show before, which is that because this whole season is leading directly into Rogue One, and that is the conclusion of Cassian Andor's story, I just wish that I liked Rogue One more, and I did not have all of the issues with it that I have. I'm just like,
Right.
after this, I'm just like, can they just like reshoot the movie or like half of it, or just like Tony Gilroy now
Again, you mean, Patrick? Because they already did that.
Well, they reshot like, I don't know, like 30% of it. Now, I'm just like, look, I'm sure if you gave him just a few weeks, having spent this much time with all of this, Gilroy could go in there and be like, okay, look, all we have to do is like adjust these little things here. And it's like, again, it is funny now that like Jyn Erso is like not a character here at all, is gonna just show up in a few days and become like, I'm just like, she's suddenly the most important person of all of this when she has been like, I mean, kind of like what I was saying about like Luke Skywalker.
About Luke Skywalker, yeah.
I'm just like, man, everyone must be so pissed at this guy, who just rolls in at the last possible second. But yeah, it is like, this is the funny thing about Star Wars and like all of Star Wars, which is like, there are so many disparate pieces that do basically fit together, but that means that you've got pieces with different tones, different levels of quality. Some are animation, some are live action, some are like comic books. It's like, the messy tapestry is part of like what makes Star Wars what it is, and you just have to accept it.
So they save Clea, they bring her to Yavin, and we see a scene where Saw is arguing with Mon Mothma, Draven, and also Bail Organa has made it to Yavin.
I mean, he's on Yavin in Rogue One.
Yeah. And we learn that Saw is attacking these Imperial transports and messing things up. And Mon Mothma says, "You've already got an Imperial destroyer on site," which is something that we obviously see in Rogue One. We also, by the way, I think see Admiral Raddus.
Yes.
In this scene, who becomes important later in Rogue One. So anyway, cool to see kind of...
Love to see some Mon Calamari.
That's right. And some Mon Mothma as well. But yeah.
Mon Mothma, I mean, really, Andor is a show about the origin of Mon Mothma's bad haircut.
That's right.
And we finally get it.
Well, you say bad haircut, Patrick. This is clearly the haircut that she always wanted to have, right? Like, no, seriously, right? Like, because she had to like have like nicely coiffed hair for her Senate job, and now that she's a rebel, she like literally gets to have whatever hairstyle she wants, and this is the one she chose. This is about Mon Mothma's self-actualization, as seen through her haircut.
You make a good point, David Chen.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think of the many looks that Mon Mothma has had across these two seasons, I think this is easily the worst.
Yeah.
And that's my own look, I'm sorry to judge a woman's appearance.
Wow.
But look, I think she's an incredibly stylish person who looks incredible for the whole series. You look at her dancing at the wedding, that's a great look. And I just don't think this is on the same level. But also you have to consider she did not have time to like pack a suitcase of like all her clothing and like her like, what kind of like hair care products do they have on Yavin?
Right.
Not as many as on Coruscant.
I just think, Patrick, we're seeing Mon Mothma's hair in its true form. And I understand if it's not something that is something you approve of, But
I respect her decision.
Also,
Here's what I'll say.
also check your biases about what constitutes good looking and bad looking, because basically I'm saying Coruscant is the tool of white supremacy. Is all I'm saying. So,
Well, you know
all
what?
right,
Okay,
anyway.
you've trapped me, and I will speak no more.
I'm being facetious, kind of. Okay, let's talk about okay, so Cassian gets upbraided for his reckless actions, and then we have like a series of scenes where like Cassian meets, tells Will and Vel about Luthen's passing. They drink to him. It's actually very nice. Like all the Luthen tribute stuff is like very nice because he's obviously been so instrumental through the whole thing. He has some meetings with Clea, talks with Clea about what's to come. And
I love the scene where Cassian and Vel talk and
Yeah.
they do a toast to Luthen, but they basically go through and they just kind of like they name like everyone they've lost along the way, even Vel mentioning his mother, and then when they say like Aldani together, I'm just like that I think this is one of the key scenes in this final arc. Just these two characters, and remember, at the end of season 1, Vel and Cinta were on Ferrix to kill Cassian.
Yeah.
And you look at where they are now, and the way that they are like on the same side, like, reminiscing about all the sacrifices on the way to this, and that like Aldani was what brought them together and what really set all of this in motion. And I thought this was really wonderful.
Indeed. Some really lovely stuff here towards the end of the show. All right, we do have there's like a brief scene at the ISB where we learn what happens to Partagas.
This is a very important scene because what he's listening to.
He's listening to Nemec's recording from season 1. Somehow Nemec's recording got out.
And even the smallest act of insurrection pushes our lines forward.
And apparently it's playing everywhere. It's been spreading everywhere, right? In fact, in reality, in our universe, it's spread everywhere as well. People are talking about Nemec's recording. It's a hot thing. About revolution and rebellion and all the things that are necessary, and how like fascism and authoritarianism is so delicate because it's so unnatural. All the great stuff. I'm not going to try to paraphrase the recording very much, but like it's out there. You should check it out. But they don't know who it is. They don't even know who like wrote it, but they know that it's been everywhere. And they're like, "Hey, Partagas, we're taking you in." I guess because of his part in this whole Luthen mess, right? Is my sense.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Hey, we're gonna take you in. Why don't you take a minute to compose yourself?" And they gave him the opportunity to basically like kill himself because they know that because he's been disgraced, he no longer wants to continue living. Go ahead.
It is, this part is so interesting where, especially when I was so happy to hear Nemec's manifesto. I think is like, one of the best things that the show has done. I was so happy to hear it come back. And at first, when it starts playing over a different scene, I'm just like, oh, is this just like a creative choice to just play that audio to like as like a reminder, and then you realize that Partagas is listening to it. And this is a thing where Nemec left Cassian with this recording. Cassian is like has to be the source of this spreading. And this is a thing where I love this idea of Nemec actually like having a legacy beyond just inspiring Cassian to like go down this road, but now is actually like his words are like affecting people across the galaxy. I love this idea. I did wonder like, oh, is this once again a victim of the show's structure that this is just being kind of like dropped at the very end? But I'm also like, would it have been better if we had scenes where Cassian like,
do we need the montage of him passing the recording on to the so-and-so?
Does he just post it on the galactic internet and be like, hey, you guys heard this recording? It's the kind of thing like I'm assuming that on Yavin, he maybe shared it with someone at some point, and then they like made a copy, and then it just kind of like spread organically, especially because there isn't really an internet here. But yeah, it was like, it's one of those things where I thought this was great. I loved having this manifesto come back and knowing that it actually has had like a greater impact. And I would not have minded if they had had more time to be able to, you know, show a little bit more of its reach. And I'm not saying we need a whole inspiring montage of like, cutting to like all the planets around the galaxy as everyone is listening to the same thing. But it's a
But
great.
you wanted some more explanation of how it went from this recording that Cassian had to like now somehow it's reached the ISB. I would agree with that.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's really that. I think this is such a great idea of this the manifesto actually just spreading, and I would not have minded even like I think it could have been even more powerful than it was if we'd just been able to have a little bit more sense of its reach.
I want to say a couple quick things about this scene. First of all, I do think it's really important to note that Nemec, the person whose words are inspiring everyone, Nemec is the young, youthful idealist. It's not the old it's not Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma, yes, her speech was very important. But like, in addition to Mon Mothma, it is the youthful idealist. It's not the old wizened person who like is like with the centrist views. It's like, here's how we compromise, right? It's the youthful idealist who has probably the most extreme positions and is the most idealistic. That is who is the most inspiring. That's whose words are taking over the galaxy. And anyway, I think that's notable given what causes young people are passionate about these days and the reactions to those causes that we have seen. I also wanted to point out that there's this great moment when Partagaz shoots himself, and then like the stormtroopers are all startled, and then like I don't know who it is. Is it Hirt? Who's there? Who's like,
well, Hirt is very dead.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah, you're right. That's right.
This
he
is
got killed.
the other ISB guy who I always forget his name, the bald one.
He is not startled. That's the point I was just going to make.
He just casually puts his hand up to be like, "Don't
He's
worry."
Like, don't worry. I knew this was going to happen. Like, chill. So anyway, I thought that was like a nice moment of like they knew they were going to give this guy an opportunity to off himself, and that's how cold the ISB and Empire really is. So,
it's true.
Patrick, let's get to the final montage of this episode.
Let's do it.
We see a lot of shit happening that's really important. First of all,
Cassian walks. Well, I mean, it's a him walking to the ship, intercut with every other character.
Right. So he's heading to Kafrene to meet Tivik, the guy from Rogue One, because they have an important information exchange that's going to happen. First of all, Patrick Willems, a lot of people were wondering, like, hey, what about Mon Mothma's husband?
I was wondering about Perrin.
What about? I think you asked that question, right? You're like, what about Mon Mothma's husband? Well, we get one shot of him in this episode. He's in a space vehicle in Coruscant, or not a space vehicle, like a hover car, whatever they're called. And he has I don't want to be too judgy, but it looks like let's just say he has somebody like who's passed out.
Isn't that Davos Skeldon's wife?
That I do not know.
Okay. I'm sure. Like I might get roasted in the comments for getting this wrong, but I thought she was Skeldon's wife, who was at the party at the wedding. Because I did wonder. I mean, obviously their marriage was not in a great place, but I was wondering, when she's like bailing on Coruscant. If like I would not have, this is not even really a criticism of that episode, of episode 9, but I would not have minded just like a line of someone being like, hey, what about your husband? And then I would love to know her response to that, because it did not, she did not seem too bothered about leaving him behind.
Patrick Willems, I was originally very skeptical, but now that I'm like looking at the images myself, I think it's at least distinctly possible that that's Davos Skeldon's wife.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they never speak, so we never, so we don't know. But it seems possible. So the point though, I think, right, of that shot is he's not happy.
He's not,
right?
but I love that
He's like staring into the middle distance.
yes,
right?
he is there drinking during the day, seemingly carrying on. I just love the idea that he is now apparently his wife has left him, and he has begun some kind of affair with his son-in-law's mother. I'm like that to me. That to me is so much better than if it were just some woman.
Fair. But yes, we got some closure with Perrin that we all wanted.
Where is Perrin a Star Wars story? What does he get up to after this?
There is a shot of Dedra Miro in in a prison that is like the one that Andor was in.
She's on
like
Narkina.
in incredible concept, right? That like
you get why Partagaz killed himself now, because it's like this probably he like saw that like, oh, this Dedra's going there. I don't want to end up there. I would rather die right now. Dedra in the Narkina prison uniform is one of the greatest images of this entire show.
I agree. And now, what makes you think? Like, I assumed that Narkina was not the only prison that was structured like this. But
but when we see, first we have a close up of her, we see that she's wearing the same uniform. But then we have a wider shot where we see her in the same kind of cell with the electrified floor. That Cassian was in. I'm like, it's the same one. It's like,
well, the only reason I bring it up is because I don't recall there being any women on Narkina 5.
Well, here's the thing. No, but that was Narkina 5.
Narkina,
there were
multiple Narkinas.
Wasn't Narkina the planet, and that was Prison 5.
Huh.
So I'm just like, it would make sense that Cassian was in the like all male prison, but surely they have like a female prison as well.
Right. Yeah.
It just the look of everything was so identical that I'm just like, oh, that's just another one of the prisons on that planet.
Right,
she's doing the same stuff.
When you see him go on Narkina 5, he's like lands on this prison, but there's like multiple other ones, and so yes, he's. But anyway, whatever the case is, it's obviously an incredible image because you're like, oh, she's in the machinery that she was working for, but in the slave labor part of it.
Well, hey, now she gets to, help build parts for the Death Star, so she's still contributing just in a new way.
It's great because we had this whole series of episodes of him escaping the Narkina 5, and then you don't, all you need is like one shot alluding to it, and then you have the full story in your mind of what her life is like. That's just like great storytelling,
It's so great. Also for her, I could not imagine a more perfect outcome. Same what we talked about how Cyril Karn's final moment is the perfect ending for him.
Yeah.
Just this image, and then just the way that Dedra twitches when like the floor switches on.
Right.
Man, I don't know if she's gonna last. I think she's just gonna have some kind of breakdown like within a month.
Yeah. There is a moment where Cassian meets eyes with the Jedi healer as he's walking to the ship, or the Force healer, I should say, not Jedi healer. We see Saw looking at the Imperial Star Destroyer in the distance on Jedha. Hey, we know that's what's about to go down with that. And then Krennic sees the Death Star as it's being assembled. It's almost done. Almost done. Andor takes off looking for Tivik. And then, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we're like, oh, okay, I guess that's everyone. Nope. There is one final scene where we see Bix. And I think she is on Mina Rao. Is that right?
Yeah, she is right back there with B2 Emo, who we see again.
B2 Emo. And we see her walking into a field. And then like we realize she is carrying a child like in her arms. And presumably it's Andor's child. And I will say the music here, I was talking about how there's multiple tracks this season that are like heavily Hans Zimmer Inception inspired. The heist with the weapons on Gorman was like very inspired by the Mombasa track on Inception. This is very similar to Time.
Oh, yeah.
The final score on Inception. Very similar chord progression, except the last chord is different. The last chord, the progression is different. But anyway, beautiful sequence. And I have to say, this is really lovely because it's a double whammy, Patrick Willems. Number one, it reveals to you, we assume that it is Cassian's child, right? It reveals to you why she wanted to leave, because let's say she knew she was pregnant before she left Cassian.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the timing quite works out because of where this is BBY, but like
we also don't know exactly how old the child is,
right? And also like, well, anyway, suffice to say, not sure the timeline works out, but let's assume that she knew she's pregnant, left Cassian. It's like, oh wow, this explains why she left, because now that's pretty freaking cold blooded to like take off without mentioning that she's pregnant with this kid, but that's how important the rebellion was to her. That's how important. She's like, I'm willing to take your child away from you because I know if you know you have a child, you're definitely not going to want to work on the rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
And so it like recolors that aspect of her doing that. And then, of course, the other thing is Andor tragically dies at the end of Rogue One, but it's like, oh, like seeing this scene is like part of Andor like lives on.
Yeah.
Like even though he's dead, like part of him lives on. And there's something wonderful about that.
I really couldn't put it any better. I think it's a perfect note to end on, and I'm sure that you're going to get a whole lot of annoying nerds being like, "Oh my god, so now we're going to have like a sequel series about like the son of Andor."
I mean, you joke, but like wait 10 years, Patrick Willems.
Right.
Who knows?
I mean, we all saw everyone being so sure about like Broom Boy in the last shot of The Last Jedi,
Right.
and I'm sure they'll do it here as well. But
Son of Andor is a good name for a TV series. So
look, here's the thing: if Tony Gilroy wants to come back and make Son of Andor, I will watch it.
Yeah. Patrick Willems, any thoughts on the final montage? Any other thoughts on the final montage? If not, feel free to share. But then I'd like us to then kind of move into final thoughts on the show, the legacy, all this stuff like that.
Yeah, this is. I mean, I feel like I'll just be repeating myself, but like this final montage is really just like hammering home those ideas that I think this last arc is about, of just like what has been built, what has been sacrificed, just like what, like the cost of everything. Because as we keep cutting back to Cassian going toward the ship that we know is going to take him on his final adventure that will basically set everything in motion. And so it's just, look, I always love a montage like this in a TV show, especially in like a season finale. Like the OC used to do it really, really well, of like, let's cut to shots of all the characters.
Everyone. Let's check in with everyone. Yeah,
exactly. Where they're feeling, like how they're feeling, what their emotional state is, that kind of thing. And then hearing the like Nicholas Bertel's rebellion theme come in really strong as he and K2 are taking off. I had chills. I thought this was, I'm like, look, for this show, I think this is the perfect ending.
Yeah, I think I might have got teary-eyed a little bit at the end, like seeing Bix with the child. Is like, oh yeah, like he like understanding now why she left, understanding that he, like, part of Andor is still out there somewhere, like it's lovely. It's a lovely way to end the show. Very beautiful. Not something I saw coming.
It is also, you've got some dialogue, before he takes off, about like, about how Bix, is he talking to Vel about how Bix is doing, and about like maybe after this is over.
Yeah, because Vel is like, hey, Cinta died, and that was very sad. So it's like, enjoy your times with your loved ones now,
Yeah, and it is heartbreaking to have him, People have been in touch with Bix, but Cassian, just being optimistic that once they get through this, they'll be able to, reunite. And it's just like, it's just really good.
Yeah. All right, closing thoughts. There is one thing I want to bring up, which is Andor's sister. This is a thing that was kicked off in the very first episode of the show. Now, my initial reaction is, oh, I can't believe they never paid that off. The showrunners have said in interviews that was intentional. They did not pay it off intentionally because they wanted to leave it open and kind of as an open motivation for Andor to always want to help people. So just wanted to acknowledge that, like, we never learned what happened to her, but like that was intentional and they wanted to use it to drive character. You could decide whether that worked for you or not, but yeah. This leads right into the events of Rogue One, Patrick Willems, and you could almost interpret Rogue One as kind of like the finale of Andor season 2, right? Like it's kind of like the big finale for Andor season 2. And I think despite some of the issues that we had with Rogue One and how mixed our reaction was because of how challenging the production process was in that movie, I think it's a suitably adequate, like a really nice conclusion to Andor's story. You know, like it all kind of fits in together. My concern slash reaction to all this is like Andor season 2 overall was like a brilliant season of television and showed that Star Wars could be challenging and relevant. I worry that it is, you know, as we've discussed, Patrick, it has achieved heights that I literally don't think we will ever see Star Wars achieve again. At least not for a really long time, maybe not in our lifetimes. And just based on where things have been trending in the Star Wars universe, you know, I've seen all of the most recent Star Wars TV shows, and they're not even remotely close to this. So as I think back on Andor season 2, like when I'm thinking like what are my macro reactions? Number one, brilliant season of TV, although I didn't love the time jumps. Number two, like and how the time jumps were handled. Number two, I worry that like it is so much beyond, like it's so beyond what all the other Star Wars is doing, even Rogue One arguably, right? Like just in terms of what it's trying to say and what it's trying to do, that it does make a lot of the stuff that comes after, like Rogue One and A New Hope, look a little bit silly by comparison. The other thing, as I reflect on it, is like they really tried to make these big allusions in Andor seasons 1 and season 2 to like um, uh, the French Resistance. They use the term genocide in Star Wars, and they like created a whole like, hey, misinformation is a big problem in the Empire. Like they tried to like have like a lot of things in Andor parallel our world because they're like, hey, we're going to take the Star Wars universe, we're really going to say something about the current political moment, and I think they succeeded. But again, I do wonder, like, oh, they really had to like make a lot of parallel Star World in order to do that. And I do worry about a little bit how like uh, one of the things that, in my opinion, that makes Star Wars special is it's not like our world, and you know they made it really similar to our world in a lot of ways. And so that's another thing that I kind of reflect on as I think back on the season. So those are kind of like some big picture reactions. Overall, again, love the show, love talking about it with you. But like as I think back on the season, those are some like the big things that come to mind. Patrick Willems, any kind of closing reactions to the series?
David Chen, I've got many reactions,
Yeah,
many thoughts on this. I mean, this is a thing where, you know, whenever I'm like pitching people on watching Andor, because you know a lot of people are justifiably cynical about Star Wars. They're like, I've been burned too many times. I don't know if I trust you when you say this one is good. And so I'm always hesitant about overhyping it. But like I've rewatched season 1 like a couple times. I have like introduced it to other people, like watched it with them, and now you know, with season 2 concluded, and I've pretty much watched like all of these episodes like about twice. This is one of my favorite TV shows of the past decade. I would say. I think this is like an all-timer television show.
I agree. To be clear,
yeah. And it is something that works and really functions without like removed from Star Wars. Like as much as you know, it obviously goes right into Rogue One. There's all these ties to other things. You can watch it and not give a shit about the rest of Star Wars at all, and just enjoy this, and it will work. It is.
I do think you need to watch Rogue One for this to really, because like,
I mean, Rogue One is like the coda to this.
yeah, but like, you know, he's going to meet Tivik. Like, if you had, if Rogue One didn't exist, it would be weird that he's like going to meet some guy that you never meet in this as the conclusion for the series, in my opinion.
It would be. Here's the thing. If someone has never seen any Star Wars before ever, I would recommend basically doing what we did and watch Rogue One first, and then watch Andor.
Yes,
because
I agree.
The Andor is better than Rogue One,
Yes,
and that
I
way
agree.
you're not going to end on like a thing that's like, oh, okay, that was all right, but not as good as the like
Right.
the 24 hours that preceded it.
Yeah. And then also Rogue One obviously ends on a extremely direct reference to what comes next as well. So it's
Right.
like, yeah.
But a thing I was texting about with some friends who have also, you know, watched the whole series is I'm like, has Andor just ruined Star Wars for me? As much as I love a bunch of Star Wars movies, mostly, I'm like I love episodes 4 and 5, as in A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. But I'm like, is any scene with like Imperial officers going to seem like a wacky cartoon now after like the level, like after like the just the level of writing and performance and nuance that we've had across this show? Like, how is it gonna fit as much as like, you know, lore wise it fits in and aligns with like the timeline? Is the tone so different that it will be like, I can't watch regular Star Wars anymore? I don't know. But
I mean, my short answer is yes, Patrick. And you know, to a really good test case is, I believe Genevieve Riley plays Mon Mothma in Ahsoka, right? And is it Ahsoka? I think it is.
I've
right?
watched Ahsoka, and I cannot
Ahsoka.
remember.
So she's in Ahsoka, and if you compare Genevieve Riley's scenes from like Andor to Ahsoka, it's like it looks like it's from a completely different universe. Like,
yeah,
this is like a serious drama.
Yeah,
and Ahsoka is like a child's program.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
in my opinion, comparatively.
Right. But that is, but also George Lucas always said that he made Star Wars for 12-year-olds.
Yeah,
and that's it. And I'm not going to demand that all of it be aimed at me and an adult in his 30s. But so I do wonder what it'll be like to watch other Star Wars now with, you know, with the context of Andor. But this is something where I'm like, on the one hand, I can't help but be somewhat cynical, and that like this is one of, if not the best things that has ever been made attached to the Star Wars brand.
Yeah,
I am doubtful that they will ever make something of this level again.
Yeah.
Or on this level again. That said, we know it's possible. When they announced a Cassian Andor show, I was not remotely excited. I was like, that's stupid. That's just like a prequel about that guy in that movie who, like, I don't want to watch this. And now I have eaten my words. And so if anything, I'm just like, if I was an executive at Lucasfilm, I would be like, all hands on deck. We know what's possible now. We have to try to do this again. What if we made a thing that was even half as good as Andor? And again, I'm not optimistic, but I would like to believe this is maybe like, you know, like a kick in the ass to like the people there being like, okay, what if we tried to get someone as good as Tony Gilroy to make something like this? What if it wasn't just all Dave Filoni playing with his toys?
Yeah, I think the circumstances that led to Andor being created are gonna be basically irreplicable.
Yeah.
You know, moving forward, like where you have a voice as strong as Tony Gilroy's, who is given, I think, over $500 million to make this show.
And that basically only happened because he got called in as a script doctor to try to fix their movie that wasn't really coming together well.
I mean, Tony Gilroy, I think, is a generational talent.
Yeah.
And it's great that he was able to bless us with his work here. But to me, the future of the Star Wars franchise, especially after like Ahsoka, sorry, not Ahsoka, The Acolyte, which is a show I did not like, but at least I appreciated was trying to do something different. Ditto Skeleton Crew. Both of those shows did not do well, from what I understand. And the future of Star Wars, in my estimation, looks very bleak in terms of new ideas, new talent coming in.
You aren't started for Sean Levy's film, Star Wars Starfighter.
I'm about as excited for it as Rian Johnson's trilogy, which is to say I'll believe that it's going to happen when it is here. Now, that one I actually think might actually occur because Sean Levy knows how to deliver movies on time. But
if nothing else, Sean Levy is a guy who is probably not going to leave over creative differences.
Wow, that is a backhanded compliment if I've ever heard one. But anyway, yeah, I am not enthusiastic about the future of Star Wars, but I'm grateful that we were able to get something so brilliant, so relevant, and so activating. I think this show, Andor, will stand the test of time, and I'm glad that people will be discovering it for hopefully years to come. So yeah, I think yeah. So anyway, Patrick, I didn't know if that was if you had anything else to say, or if that you had other points you want to make.
Basically, I think this show is like kind of a miracle that something of this level of quality with this like level of like artistry and nuance was made on this scale, was allowed to be made by the Disney Corporation, that someone like Tony Gilroy and the astounding team he assembled were given this much free reign to make the show they wanted to make, and clearly not having to compromise much. Say what was, we can talk forever about the future of Star Wars and stuff like that, but I am just really grateful that we got this show.
Same. And I'm grateful for all of our listeners and viewers for engaging with us. Grateful to Patrick Willems for making this work in his schedule. Obviously, Patrick and I don't podcast every week together, but we were able to make this work, and so hope you enjoyed it. But yeah, check out Patrick's work at youtube.com/Patrick H. Willems. I want to throw a shout out to all the paid subscribers at decodingtv.com for making this podcast possible. And if you are enjoying conversations like this one, subscribe to the channel, youtube.com/decodingtv, or Decoding TV, wherever podcasts can be found. He's Patrick Willems. I'm David Chen. And until Son of Andor comes out in 5, 10, 15 years, we're signing off. Until next time, goodbye.
Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.